This is the biggest low-budget film being made anywhere in the world at this time.
It's the biggest low-budget film being made in the Wellington area.
In the Wellington area. It's the biggest low-budget film being made in the history of the planet.
You know, even though we shot these 3 movies for 15 months, if we just had one unit shooting everything that needed to be shot, we'd be probably going for 6 or 7 years.
We had these many units shooting, often 5 units shooting, sometimes 7 units shooting. Almost always we shot with 2 cameras on each unit.
It was fairly high speed. I mean, Peter is one of those classic sort of people that his capacity to absorb a lot of information I find really amazing. So he's one of those sort of people that can work several shoots at once.
1A was the main unit and the other unit was called 1B. And then it became apparent that even those 2 units were not going to get through this amount of footage, so we created a second unit, which was directed by John Mahaffey. And eventually, as we went along, we realised that the second unit were not going to get through everything that they needed to get through either. So we created a second unit, which was directed by Geoff Murphy.
Pete made it very clear that he couldn't be everywhere that he would like to be at every one time, but the people that were there in his place were ideal. They were the perfect people to be there. And Pete trusted them intrinsically, so we did the same.
Our principal Hobbiton set was in a farm near the town of Matamata, and we shot a lot of the location footage there.
We'd seen beautiful sets before, but this was unbelievable because it was there, it was real, it was as we had imagined it. You know, Bag End was there with the massive tree sticking out of the top, coming down, as we'd seen it in various paintings and images before. It was exactly how we'd imagined it.
Hobbiton was an exceptional location, except that it was extremely difficult to access. All the roads were really paths. It was a very fragile landscape, and yet we basically still had to come in with fairly sizable technology. It just required more physical labour to actually work the location.
Today we're keeping the chimneys up and running. There's 47 chimneys in the location, which all have particular secret little ingredient smoke pots in them to keep them up and running. So it looks like there's a little bit of activity happening in the buildings. So, and maha to you too.
Philosophically, as far as what we wanted to do with Hobbiton, since it was the opening of the film, we basically wanted to start off with sort of a very idyllic place, which is very, expressive of a simple lifestyle, a rural lifestyle, where people are actually very much in touch with nature. And I just wanted to make everyone feel like that it was like a holiday destination. People would love to want to go there.
When you're walking throughout the Shire, you could see what an enviable existence it was for the hobbits.
It's excellent. Everything is absolutely a joy to be here.
It's fun. It's something totally different. I think I would have paid money to be a hobbit, but no, it's been great.
Well, it's the 17th of January 2000. It's our first day back on the shoot since Christmas in the new century, and it was also Ian McKellen's first day today.
You're late.
A wizard is never late. Frodo Baggins. Nor is he early. He arrives precisely when he means to.
And it felt like coming home, and that was a good feeling for me, because Gandalf was returning back to an area of Middle-earth that he loved and respected.
No, thank you. We don't want any visitors, well-wishers, or distant relations.
Yes, and what about very old friends?
Of course, once Gandalf walks inside Bag End, then you're into a studio. You're no longer at Matamata, you're several hundred miles away, and you're in a small, confined studio.
Often we filmed in 2 different scale sets. So Bag End was built, for example, in a large-size scale for Ian Holm to appear in, and a small scale, the Hobbit-size scale, for Ian McKellen to walk through.
And in the smaller one, I, as a normal-sized person, could look enormous, because everything in Bag End was small.
The Bilbo's party, which takes place on the party field, we see the party field at Matamata in the daytime being prepared, but when you actually go to the party at night, you're now inside a studio. You're not in Matamata at all. You're in the middle of the day. It's 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and you've got a studio pretending to be a Hobbit party at night.
It would be great to get, with the fireworks, it would be great to get more applause, you know? We're getting sort of, that, which is nice, it's certainly better. But if we got a bit of, you know, if we got a bit of jumping and actually cheering, more cheering and clapping at each firework burst will be good.
It was great because they had all these extras as hobbits, you know, and this party scene was when they did that, the dance, and something that a lot of people might not have noticed is I play in the band, the Hobbit band. I'm up there with my Hobbit ukulele, whatever it may be.
Bilbo's going to tell a story just like at story time. So we need you guys to be sitting on the mat, just like you do at story time.
Who wants to see some butterflies? Jump up and down, jump up and down. And 1 and 2 and 3 and...
I remember Pete saying to us, this is the real time where you are hobbits, where you behave as hobbits. There's no ulterior motive. You don't know about this mission yet. You're not worried about anything. You're just embracing who you are as young hobbits, you know. So we really just went to town at that point and had some fun. And I remember the day where the firework blows up in our face.
As soon as it goes bang, you've just got to let it go, okay? So
Peter said to us that when we're holding the firework, it will be lifted up by a piece of string, and there'll be like a...
I didn't know.
Whoosh!
It was your idea.
To just kind of scare us and let the cameraman know when the cut is going to happen for the real explosion. But Billy, being this kind of slightly feminine character that he is, was really quite scared by it and made this girly kind of woo shriek, which I barely got through the take on.
You're supposed to stick it in the ground.
Where's in the ground? Outside. That's a good idea.
I just get such a fright, and Dom just gave me abuse for it all day.
You're supposed to stick it in the ground.
It is in the ground.
Outside.
That was your idea.
You know, we've been shooting for about 4 months now, and we finally get to start to do things with the villains. Like, we've done a lot of shooting with the hobbits and Aragorn and our heroes, and it's great to finally get the dark part of the story on film to start to set up the sort of the opposition, as it were. You're putting the pieces together and you're realising that
this is... Yes, I've been saying all the time to myself, for his ring to the sun, ruins.
Yeah.
Almost to myself.
Almost to yourself. Might be quite nice. But it's obviously a big thrill to work with someone like Christopher Lee, who's a bit of a icon, and I mean, I haven't mentioned it to him at this stage, but I've been a big fan of his, obviously, most of my life, and watching Hammer horror double features when I was a kid, and you know, it's just sort of fun and a little bit unbelievable to finally be working with someone like that and having them on the set and directing them, and you know, it's a big thrill.
Now, my first day in the garden, remember, we got to take 10, which is very unusual with me. I don't say that in an immodest way. I mean, there just isn't time in most films. Wait a minute, 10, 11, 12. Surely we got that right. But it was Peter who wanted that line up, that line down, that word, that way, and those words, that way, or whatever. He waited until he got it. And it took a lot of takes sometimes. Well, we got used to it and realized that was the way he worked. No problem. I remember saying to Ian, I'm getting a bit worried about this, you know, because I think they got to take 11 or 12 or something, and I think I got it right. Oh, he said, you don't have to worry about that. I had 24 takes the other day, and it was only a couple of lines.
Why don't I say, just to complicate it, say your line again.
The 9 have left me no small goal. They have crossed the Isengard.
The 9?
The 9? No.
The interior of Orsank was, as far as I was concerned, papers, dust, and the sunlight coming through stained glass, a mess. And then leading out from that, the more imposing, dark in a sanctum with Saruman's large chair, like a throne, raised up above the very shiny black surface of the floor. It was a place like no other. I'd never been in a room like that. It didn't remind me of anything. And I just thought, oh, I see, this is where Saruman thrives and plots. And so that was a very evocative and helpful set.
The costume was extremely long, and I had considerable difficulty in walking up the steps to my throne. Sometimes I managed to do it, sometimes I didn't. And one day I was driven to distraction when I kept on tripping, and I said,
I'm sorry, I cannot get up these goddamn steps smoothly. I can't do it, Peter. I'm sorry, because every time I try, I step on the thing.
And a voice came from near the camera saying, well, you did it this morning. It put me in my place.
When did Saruman the Wise abandon reason for madness?
When I was dealing with 1B, I was having to do the wizard fight. It was one of those deals where, you know, I was doing the stunt shots between Gandalf and Saruman. So you're gonna hit the ground and you're gonna hit the ground and it's like, Jesus.
The stunts were superbly well done. I had no idea what it was going to look like. I had no idea until I saw the film. Works very well indeed.
Second unit's first day was actually at night, and it was the moment with the trees being ripped out at Isengard. That was the first thing they shot. And we were kind of in and out of rain that whole weekend. And that kind of became the mantra for second unit.
It rained for about 2 weeks, and so this whole scene was shot in pouring rain in the middle of the night on beautiful green grass, which turned into about 8 inches of slimy mud within an hour of starting. And it just added another dimension to the whole the look of it. It just added a huge, wonderful shininess, muddiness, grungy, sort of real element that no one could have imagined, really.
The very first day of photography, in actual fact, was a scene on the wooded road where the hobbits have to hide from the Ringwraith.
I thought you could turn around and say, quick! You know, just quick, yeah.
Rather than go to some remote place in the country to film this woodland, obviously there's many, many wonderful woods in New Zealand. You know, there's actually a park in the middle of the city that it's called Mount Victoria, and it's a wooded park land. It's only 5 minutes drive from the studio, and we thought, well, you know, why travel down to the South Island, or, you know, when we can actually just shoot this on our doorstep.
We're going into standby mode then, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Say one more time, all mobile phones had better be off or they'll end up in the ocean. And your radios off if they're open, please. No excuses.
You know, Cara Cunningham, for me, our first assistant director, you know, she's one of those people that you can't imagine getting through the movies without.
She has a great aesthetic understanding of what you're trying to achieve. So if it's sort of crunch time and she has a problem, you do everything in your power to help her out, because all the rest of the time she's doing absolutely everything in her power to allow Peter and myself to perform our jobs to the maximum possibility.
And set.
And action!
Get off the road! Quick! Quick! I knew what I was in for that day when Peter, you know, would bring the second or the third camera in and put it in close on us and say, okay, now it's the most terrifying thing you've ever experienced. It's just this primal fear, and I want you to feel the fear. And he's talking us through this kind of idea of having our kind of spirit and souls and our whole essence disturbed by the presence of this Black Rider, and realizing that you couldn't just think about that and you couldn't just feel it, that something was going to have to happen, that it registered for Peter and on screen. It was an awesome acting challenge. awesome.
The town of Bree was one of the very first sets that we shot in, you know, towards the end of our first week of shooting.
I think we shot all of Bree, for the most part, the actual city street of Bree in one night. And we had the rain towers, and it was mad and crazy. It blew me away that they could take a very small piece of set and sort of build it into the earth and then film it and pan off of it and just trust that digitally the rest of the world would be created beyond that.
The Prancing Pony was, like most of the sets, very authentic, really well crafted. It was a place where you step on the soundstage, you walk in the door to the Prancing Pony, and you're there. I mean, it was so well constructed.
And then we had these massive tables that we sat at. So it made us look small, like we were too small for the big tables. Big mugs and, you know, big plates. It made us feel smaller, and it kind of made that world more realistic for us.
What's that? This, my friend, is a pint. It comes in pints.
Oh.
I can get you one.
It's really nice for the people involved in the Midgewater Marshes sequence to see it back in the DVD.
I think it was important to feel that the journey from Bree to Rivendell was not an easy one.
The Midgewaters were basically us along this journey with Strider, trudging through these kind of marshy, nasty wetlands.
It was freezing cold, and our feet were so cold that you just couldn't feel anything. Meanwhile, you've got Pete Jackson like hiding underneath the little trailer, giggling, you know, because he's got his 4 hobbits and Aragorn, going through this water that stinks, and we're falling over, and Billy fell flat on his back, and it was a rough day. And I remember we all went to the pub that night and were drinking lots of kind of hearty drinks like whiskey and mulled wine and all that kind of stuff, because it just chilled you to your bones, you know.
The sword work on the movie was obviously incredibly important. The Weathertop fight was one of the early fights in the film.
Weathertop was the main thing that we rehearsed before we started filming.
You know, the actors arrived about 6 or 8 weeks before the shoot. Having sword lessons with Bob Anderson was always part of their regime.
We had so much fun learning how to do the sword fighting, and we actually choreographed a number of very involved sequences. And I remember when we were filming on Weathertop, I was bringing the full weight of my kind of anger and ferocity to it. And I remember Peter saying, well, listen, you know, you're a hobbit, and you couldn't actually generate that much force to, like, have your sword move the sword of the Ringwraith if you were to strike it. So you got to kind of pull it back. And I remember feeling like, man, no one's gonna see that I'm really good at this sword stuff. I'm gonna have to I gotta just be like a little hobbit doing it.
The irony is that the person that had to be the most accomplished swordsman in the film, which was Viggo Mortensen playing Aragorn, Viggo didn't get cast in the movie until we were a few days into shooting the film. So he didn't have any of the advantage of this training with Bob, and he'd never used a sword before. So Viggo arrives in New Zealand, he gets off the plane, and the Weathertop fight scene is like the first thing he's going to shoot.
So Bob Anderson was my first guide, basically, and he, you know, he was pretty strict, but really encouraging.
I think he gave Viggo the most crash course in sword fighting that anyone's ever had, because Viggo had to be there fighting these ringwraiths, fighting 5 ringwraiths at the same time, looking like an expert swordsman. And I'll tell you what, you know, Viggo just became, I think, you know, the greatest swordsman that Bob has ever worked with in his entire career.
we actually realized that bringing Arwen's voice down to a really low register, how that suddenly just made everything work, because it showed her depth and her age and her wisdom. It was hard, I mean, just purely guttural, you know, kind of Lothlórien. It sounded really weird at times when I was doing it. I thought, oh my God, this is too deep, but it worked. And it was funny when my dad saw the movie for the first time. He's like, whose voice was that? I was like, Dad, you jerk. It's mine, I'm an actress.
Right hard. Don't look back.
And cutting! Cut!
They must have hundreds of hours of footage of Jane riding, and she was incredible.
As the truck gets a length ahead, so he's actually just got momentum on, then you could actually set yourself in.
The action that we're doing is like, you know, like yesterday we were jumping over a log and then galloping down a steep hill. Another day, you know, you're galloping along, weaving through trees.
I don't think it was ever a question. I was never going to be allowed on the stallion going at that speed. That was just never an option. I was on the back of a truck on a barrel with, you know, this kind of a horse skin wrapped around it, and I had to do this for 5 days and look scared. And, I mean, that was rough.
The Rivendell location was primarily built at a park called Kaitoki.
We chose it really because it had, you know, quite a closed-in geography, and so that the set that we built would have a sense of drifting off into the forest. So its boundaries were sort of forested, if you like.
So, I mean, the elves, that whole concept of being one with the nature was pretty important, and as a result, Peter had the design team, you know, have this kind of indoor-outdoor feel throughout. So we would have outdoor sets, you know, for exterior shooting, as well as sets outdoors for interior shooting. And we mimic that on the stage as well, where we would have, you know, interior sets of Rivendell that still had that outdoor feel. So we'd have trees on the stage, you know, or we'd have like, you know, matte painting backdrops, you know, of rocks and whatnot in the distance.
But the thing is, I mean, in the end, you still basically, what you do is you look at, you know, you just try and sort of remember the qualities of natural light that are in the environment, or the sort of qualities you want to achieve. And then you go into the studio, and now you're basically trying to achieve those qualities, except that you have to do it artificially.
The reason we built Elrond's council chamber inside was we had to be able to control the environment completely, so it wasn't something we could really shoot out at Kaitoki.
You know, we were literally sitting in a circle of actors like Ian McKellen, Hugo Weaving, Viggo Mortensen, Sean Bean, John Rhys-Davies, you know, Elijah was there, and, you know, it was just like I was looking around, I was sitting there thinking, whoa, this is a real lineup of some greats.
Sauron himself forged the One Ring. Molten gold is mixed with his own blood. It contains his life force.
The Council of Elrond is a long scene in the book, much shorter in the film, but it did take a long time to shoot.
It dominates most of my memory because the council scene took about, my God, I think it took the better half of like 5 days.
We spent a lot of time there because we had to sort of cover it from more or less every angle. You see all the characters all in a circle. So we had to shoot it from everybody's point of view. And so by the end, I mean, I think we all knew each other's lines because we'd heard them that many times.
It was probably the longest sequence in the movie, which is kind of shocking because I think that there are scenes that seem a little bit more complicated than that. But just pure scenes, that was one of the longest.
You shall be the Fellowship of the Ring.
Right. Where are we going?
Some of the locations were incredibly remote. We occasionally just flew people in choppers, which was a fairly major operation. We usually had to have 4 or 5 helicopters making several trips to the location to get everybody up there. And there was always, serious safety considerations, because if you're stuck on these mountains and suddenly, a storm sweeps in or clouds sweep in, the helicopters kind of can't land or fly, and there's a very big danger that everyone's going to get stranded and have to spend the night on this mountaintop or wherever you are. And so we always, used to take survival kits up there. We used to take tents and rations and stuff up there in case the situation arose that we would get stuck on a mountain for a day or two without being able to be rescued. It was always a little bit tense. And one of the most spectacular mountains was a place near Mount Aspiring, where we did the scene in the snow where Boromir picks up the ring out of the snow and holds it, and that was shot on a very remote mountainside, because I just wanted to be able to feel that we were really up the mountains and we weren't just cheating it on a ski field or something somewhere.
I think it took 10 or 15 minutes to get there, and I remember we flew through cloud, which freaked me out, 'cause couldn't see anything. And I was normally fine in helicopters, and I was always really excited to be in helicopters, but it was actually quite turbulent. The weather wasn't perfect.
And all the other guys were great. They were filming it, and Dominic and Billy and Orlando saying, "Oh man, this is amazing." And I was sort of gripping the seat, just thinking, when are we going to get there?
I was worried when we got there, all Sean would be able to think about, or would be thinking about for the rest of the day, was, I have to ride back, And I thought, man, it's a crucial scene, and he has a moment with the ring. It's a very important moment for the Fellowship, and he really did well. I thought that was one of his outstanding moments in the movie.
It is a strange fate that we should suffer so much fear and doubt over so small a thing.
Afterwards, I said, when we were getting ready to go, and I said, were you thinking about the fact that we would have to ride back again in the helicopter? Were you thinking about it? He says, all the time, the whole time. I said, man, I don't know how you did it, but you really nailed it. After this particular journey, he didn't take any more helicopter rides. He just said, that's it. I'll walk, I'll swim, I'll crawl, I'll do whatever it takes. I'll walk all night to get there by morning, but I'm not taking any more helicopter rides.
Shortly afterwards, we had to go to another location, which was in the Remarkables in Queenstown by a lake to shoot a scene.
Well, Sean absolutely did not want to fly, and said, look, I'll take the ski lift up, and then I'll walk the rest of the way.
We shot there for 2 or 3 days, and our day would begin with everybody flying in the helicopters. And as we flew over at 7:30 in the morning, we'd look down, and there'd be this tiny black speck climbing the cliff. It was almost like a cliff face, and it was Sean Bean dressed up as Boromir, like a human fly on the wall, clambering up this mountainside all by himself to sort of get to the location, because he didn't want to go there in a chopper. He had 2 hours of climbing to do.
Well, they used to see me from the helicopter going, and I was sweating at the end. It was like a real adventure getting over that sort of mountain to get to the set, but I preferred doing it that way.
The scene of the Fellowship and the Avalanche was very difficult to shoot. I actually didn't shoot much of that. That was directed by John Mahaffey. It was shot in a stage with this fake snow.
The simulated snow is a rice-based product.
To taste, it was kind of salty or something. It was kind of like almost like sawdust, salty sort of sawdust or something. It was horrible.
It gets into your eyes. It affects your eyes more than anything else.
He will actually leave Gandalf and go behind him.
Even after one day of it, it left your face really red and raw, it just really got in your eyes and your ears, your whole body. It was a high salt content in it, whatever it was.
Filmmaking is very counterintuitive. When it's supposed to be freezing cold and snowing, you're invariably on a set where the Klieg lights are on and you're so hot that your sweat is pouring down your face.
You had to keep saying to yourself, no, I'm feeling very cold. I'm in the snow. Despite the warmth of the bright lights. However, uncomfortable is what it must be to be in an avalanche, and so in the end it's probably an aid to believability.
The exterior for Moria was shot on a wet set. It was shot in a car park right by a railway station, which is really funny when you think about it, because, you know, it looks so convincing as the outside of a lake.
But that was good. It was worth doing one more.
We will do one more. That was very nice. Thank you, broom people.
Hey, Orlando? Yeah? Just be careful turning, because it looks a little like if you're turning that far, you'd probably see it. Okay. Being an elf and everything, so probably don't turn quite so much. Okay.
It was freezing. The nights that we had to do the exterior stuff there, it was some of the coldest nights I can remember. I remember actually Billy Boyd, I think, was probably the coldest of us all.
That evening is the coldest my feet have ever been, to the point that I was almost going to have to say it, like, I can't actually go on. It was like 4 or 5 in the morning, and we'd done this shot quite a few times, and I was becoming really, really uncomfortable. So that's my abiding memory of outside the gates of Moria.
We must face the long dark of Moria.
When I was walking with the staff in the mines of Moria, which had to have an illuminated bulb on top, that had to be provided with electricity, and it travelled along the wire through a hollow staff out through the bottom, and the wire was hidden under the robes into a battery pack attached to my back.
I don't think you were sort of holding it in any particularly. Well, I think you're just using it, you know, just as a torch, basically. Yeah.
Brian Bansgrove was our chief lighting technician or gaffer.
DPs like to have a great relationship with their chief lighting technicians or gaffers, and because sometimes, you know, it can get a bit lonely out there. There's not a lot of people that really sort of understand the finer intricacies of light. I basically really appreciated Brian for his eye. It's great when you've got a gaffer on set who actually understands the emotion of what you're trying to do with the light that you've got.
And when you do a film that's visually effects laden and you're dealing with CG characters, you often have to act to someone that might not even be there. If you're acting with a cave troll, for example, well, there is no cave troll.
As an actor, you just had to believe that they were going to create something spectacular that you were fighting.
Peter showed us things, CGI stuff, you know, which gives an idea of what we were fighting. Even though it was thin air, we knew what it would probably look like in the end. And once you get into the rhythm of that, that's fine, you know, you can sort of deal with it, and it becomes very natural.
We'd already faced so many different situations together as a group that it was all right. And there was just a lot more that was invisible, and therefore a lot more make-believe involved in that, shooting that sequence.
And then when you see it all put together, it's fantastic because it all makes sense. You know, sometimes somebody's telling you to do something, it seems really weird, and it seems wrong, and it seems, but this is crazy. But you said, trust it, it's going to look good. And it did, you know.
Well, the one thing that you're not going to be able to tell at the moment is that we're in this warehouse next to Wellington Airport, and it's incredibly hot and humid, and there's no air conditioning in the building, and we've got huge amounts of light, and it's really giving this place a very subtropical jungle sort of feel. It's freezing in here, Pete. You want a jumper? Yeah, I better get my big woolly jacket and my gloves and my balaclava.
I wanted to do something special for Galadriel. I felt that of all the people in the story, she was, in a way, more connected with a spiritual world. And I took my biggest cue off out of the writing of Tolkien, which basically described her as saying, no sign of age was upon her, except in the depths of her eyes, keen lances in the starlight, wells of deep memory. I wanted to find a visual interpretation for that somehow. So what we did, Brian and I did a few little experiments, and we eventually came up with what we called the Galadrielite. We went out and bought many Christmas lights, and we festooned them all over this rig. And what it did is it actually reflects like Starfield in her eyes. Because, you know, to me, it's like a lot of performances in the eyes, and I wanted her highlights to be different to everybody else's in the film.
The scene where the Fellowship depart Lorien and receive their gifts had to be shot on the sort of edge of a pretty riverbank, and instead of finding a river, we actually found basically a lake, a small lake in a country estate called Fernside. We're just basically pumping a lot of smoke and using the sun and trying to get, God rays and things to make it feel a little bit ethereal, elven, dreamlike, Lothlórien.
I had a lot of fun there in that location. They had this huge trunk with huge roots going off into the water, as if they were almost like little docking areas, these huge roots going into the water. So yeah, that was a beautiful location, actually.
There was a dreamlike quality to that whole place, with all of the kind of fog that we put through there, and the fact that we as the Fellowship were kind of together in this sequence as well.
You Samwise Gamgee, elven room.
Thank you, my lady. Look, have you run out of those nice shiny daggers?
We shot that scene over several days, which I'm really glad has gone back into the extended cut now, because it's quite a nice scene and sort of essential to the story, because the Fellowship are given these gifts which they use in subsequent movies. So I'm glad that we're actually able to let people see that scene now, because it sort of sets things up for the next two films.
Technically, the scene was difficult because when you read about it in the book, it's quite enchanting. Gimli says, yes, there is one thing I would have. I would have one hair from your head. And she gives him 3. Now, on the page, that works. But think about it in terms of film. There's the dwarf with his great big gloves on. And there's this elegant, wonderful woman. And what's she going to be doing? She's going to be doing, all right, then you want a hair sort of thing. Oh, damn. Well, there it is. Can you see the hair? There is actually a hair in my hand, all right? Now, she's got to fish out 3 anyway. All right, so now, what does she do? She gives this hair to me. What do I do with it? I mean, how do I take it? I mean, do I put it in the glove like that and say, oh, yeah? I mean, it is just too cumbersome to film.
What was her gift? I asked her for one hair from her golden head. She gave me 3.
Some of the rivers that we were shooting on in the South Island, they were picked for their beauty, but they were fast flowing and they were very deep. There were currents, and so one of the training regimes that we set up for our actors when they first arrived in New Zealand was boat handling skills, basic like canoe type skills, and I know they had a lot of fun. I think that most of their training, which was done off a wharf in the harbour, revolved around trying to make each other sink. But it did ultimately come in very handy, because usually it wasn't doubles in these boats, it was usually the actors themselves. We only had one mishap that I was aware of, which was shooting the scene where the actors are looking up at the Argonath. And that was a very deep, swift-flowing river. And Orlando Bloom was paddling his canoe, and he had a small Gimli. It wasn't John Rhys-Davies, it was Brett, who was sort of a small Gimli, double dwarf size.
Myself and Brett were in this boat, and one of the guys filming grabbed the front of our boat and stopped us because we were going on downstream, and he just stopped us to catch us. But the water was running so fast that when he held onto the boat, it just started to come over the top of the boat and into the boat. And so we just started going down. And I was going, let go of the boat, let go, man, because he was holding onto it, trying to help us.
And these guys went under the water. The boat sunk, and all we had lots of safety boats. They rushed in.
And Brett Beatty was in. I mean, it's kind of funny, except that Brett was in this like armor. Like, he's in heavy armor, man. That's chainmail that he was wearing, and he's got this wetsuit on. And he had like a blow up thing underneath him, a blow up life jacket in case. And he pulled that, and it didn't really inflate. I could see him going down, so I just went like, I was holding on to this guy, and I just yanked him up out of the water, and he was like this, and I was holding him up like this, and he was like going, like, he was freaked out, man. And we chucked him up, and he was okay, but it was like, for a minute there, man. I mean, that could have been bad.
I think Orlando was more embarrassed than anything to be the one member of the Fellowship who kind of sunk his boat whilst on active duty.
And those boats, as beautiful as they are were pretty, you know, pretty tippy. They were kind of flimsy in a way. And because of the scale issue, it was Kieran Shaw, you know, was Frodo. And I remember that when we did the wide shot, we were really moving down that river. And Kieran, we were doing the first take, and Kieran's going, "Amigo, don't worry about me." And I'm like, what do you mean? I'm trying to talk without moving my lips, you know, because and he goes, "Well, if we flip over," I said, "We're not going to flip over." And he goes, "If we flip over, just save yourself. I can't swim." I said, "What?" You know, I couldn't believe it. And then I got really nervous. You know, like if someone's watching you driving, you start overcoming. And I was like, every eddy now became fraught with, you know, possibility. And after that take, I said, "You're kidding, right?" And he goes, "No, I'm even afraid to take a bath." I'm like, Jesus.
Towards the end of 1999, and like 2 or 3 months after we started shooting, we ended up filming our first really big battle scenes, I guess, of the trilogy, and they were the Amon Hen fights at the climax of the Fellowship.
This is a fight routine that happens on top of this hill, and you guys are charged up the brow of the hill, and you're flooding over here, and Aragorn here, Vigo, gets to fight you single-handedly. One versus 100.
Your killing machines move forward with the intention that you're going to kill. So keep it fluid, not stilted. Give it the best you can. Thank you.
Richard made this impassioned speech, you know, for the sake of authenticity, this and that. But it was about bloodlust, about don't be afraid to maim, and just, I mean, you know, he was trying to do justice to Tolkien's vision, you know, and so he was just, there is no mercy, there is no, and these guys, you could see them shaking with anticipation, and I looked over at Pete, and then I looked over at the stunt coordinator, who was just going like that, who was feeling the same as I, which was, these guys didn't need any more you know, encouragement to, like, you know, beat the snot out of me. I was like, I'm not gonna be ashamed if I have to just turn around and run my ass off down the hill. It's no problem. You know, I got a long shoot ahead of me.
It was blazingly hot. It was like, you know, over 100 degrees, and these poor guys were wearing this, you know, all this leather and fiberglass costumes with rubber masks.
Warm in there. Yes, very warm in there. Cheers, guys. Cheers.
Right. Coming. Down, turn around, yep, turn around.
In your stomach.
Yep.
Stomach. There.
Gotcha. The great rules of karate are, if you cannot stand, you cannot fight. If you cannot see, you cannot fight. If you cannot breathe, you cannot fight. Sure enough, there I am, my helmet over my eyes like that. And in truth, very, very hard to fight.
I think I have to say that Lurtz, who is a general of the Urukai army, is potentially my favourite character. He's played by an actor called Lawrence Mohure, an imposing gentleman even when he's not in his prosthetics.
Strike a pose and let's get with it.
And stay on it.
Whoa.
Stay like that.
Barry Osborne directed most of the fight between Aragorn and Lurtz.
When you're running into that next shot, you really take off. And action, Vigo.
On this movie, I have so much to do that it takes actually quite a lot of effort to be able to do this. And I find myself conflicted. But right now, finishing the movie seems to me to be the most important thing, and helping Peter out in that fashion is appropriate on this film.
Okay. Oh, well, that looks fine. Are you going to be okay with light and stuff? Have you got some lights up there?
Are you going to tie it off?
Blasting in there. Okay, well, you better shoot it fast then before it gets too shaky.
Well, I don't think, we don't want to lock it off long enough because it's just...
But we have to keep him humid. We have to keep him feeling happy and good. So we just give him a camera and a crew, and he's as happy as Larry. He stays off our backs. It's a brilliant scheme.
Right, Barry?
Thanks.
It's all right. I said that through.
I know you did.
Okay, yeah, now Barry's got a motivation now, you see, you won't. So come towards us, Barry, and raise your sword. That's it.
Like that.
Anytime you make a movie with the sort of physical action, you know, that we have, there's always a danger of people getting hurt. I mean, you obviously take every possible precaution that you can, but you know, with that, people do get hurt. Fortunately, on the film, we never had any particularly serious injuries. Not really serious, although one of the worst ones actually happened to Sean Astin. And it was a relatively simple shot where Sean had to be on the shore of the lake, and he had to run out to the boat.
I'm running at a dead sprint, and I get in, and my left foot and as my right foot lands about 2 feet in the water, just this huge sharp pain, and I grabbed onto the side of the boat and I just looked down, and it hurt so bad.
Let's sit him down and have a look at his foot. Mikey, where are you? Let's sit him down and have a look at his foot. You want to sit on the bench or do you want to sit on a chair?
His foot had virtually been completely impaled on this shard of glass.
When they took the prosthetic off, it was a big, old, deep gash in the foot. I mean, it was a substantial cut.
Doing the same action again.
Oh my God!
It's the linear that run over the top.
It's a lot of blood,
So
man.
Michael, get a
It's a lot of blood.
Probably gonna need a bit. We could dry it off.
There was this sort of globular thing, this mass that came out of the slit in his foot, that I was fascinated with.
Master Frodo can play with my clots anytime he wants to.
I'm fascinated by his blood clot.
We were a good hour, an hour and a half's drive out of Tiana. It was a long way. It was quite remote. We called for a chopper to come in because we knew we needed to get him to a hospital very, very quickly because there was a lot of bleeding.
So the helicopter guy came out, and we jumped in, and it was Jacques Cousteau's pilot, the guy who had flown Jacques Cousteau around on some of his expeditions, which I thought was really cool.
You know, it's a magic project because it made everyone so passionate, but like when I walk away from it, it's not only the creation of the film, it's the people who created it is what is the experience that I love.
There was an awful lot of love involved in making this film, and it spread out from Peter Jackson, who was typical of his other Kiwis. Dedication and love are all mixed together.
It was made with love, it was made with great care and commitment, and I do genuinely think that spirit has made its way onto the screen. And that in a way, to me, is what the real heart of the Fellowship of the Ring is. It goes beyond the heart of Tolkien's book, and something of this incredible spirit that was used making it has made its way onto the finished film.